Welcome to the Power of Owning Your Career podcast. I'm your host, Simone Morris, and I have a passion for empowering others to take responsibility for their careers. Yes, I've written several books on owning your career and am loving hosting this podcast. This podcast is for you if you're willing to make a shift to the driver's seat in your career. We feature leaders who inspire, empower, and motivate you for consistent career action for results. Please continue to join us every Sunday when a new episode is released. Let's get into this week's show. Join me in episode 2 with Marty McDonald, founder of Boss Woman Media. She says she is a corporate queen turned side hustler turned full-time entrepreneur who is celebrating 1 year in business. I feel sure you'll enjoy this episode. It's like reading a really good book that you don't want to end. Marty is authentic, inspiring, and humble as she shares her story. She demonstrates that she isn't afraid of risk and decided that she was ready for the driver's seat in her career. So she quit her job to execute on her vision. And although her plan wasn't solid, she bet on herself, and she is rocking it as an entrepreneur with a grand vision for the future. Marty, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm excited. And we were just talking about being ex-9-to-5ers and being able to get into the driver's seat for our career. So right. I'm super thrilled for you to share your story, your journey, and your advice and wisdom to our listeners.
Absolutely. I am a corporate queen turned side hustler turned full-time now entrepreneur celebrating 1 year of being out on my own. I have a really interesting career track. I studied interior design and architecture in college. I worked in that field for about 4 years. My family really invested for me to be in that field. My dad sent me to study abroad. I went to the University of Dublin when I was in college for a summer to study architecture. And so that was kind of where my career was going, right? Until it's funny how, things happen and you have to pivot. So I worked in that field and then the market crashed in 2008. I graduated college in 2007. Market crashed in 2008. And basically I walked into my job one day and my boss told me, go cash your paycheck today. If you don't cash it today, the money is not going to even be there.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my God, let me go cash my paycheck. I cashed my paycheck and I was forced to move back home. And I was living in Atlanta at that time. And so I moved back home. Just like any new graduate, I had lived in Atlanta for about a year. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And so my dad told me we were going to go on a summer tour to Europe and we're going to travel to 9 different countries. I was like, oh, great. This sounds fun. It's almost like what kids are calling the gap year now. After high school, I kind of did that after I worked. And then I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. And so I did that. While I was in Europe, I was applying for jobs everywhere. And so I got a job offer in Dallas, Texas. And I had never even been to the city of Dallas before. I found an apartment on my layover from Europe back home in Tennessee. And I took the job. I took the job because I was like, I don't know what else I'm going to do. So I'm just going to take the job. I worked at that job for about 2.5 years. My boss came up to me and said, hey, you have 2 options. Either I have to lay you off because, again, the economy was just so unstable. I have to lay you off because we are completely closing your department, or you can move to the marketing department. Which one do you want? I was like, well, I wasn't married at the time. I didn't want to go back home. So I was like, send me to marketing. I'll learn and I'll figure it out. So I moved to marketing, and that's when I took off in my career of marketing. So I worked in marketing for about 7 years. I did product development, innovation work. And so I worked with tons of brands on identifying who their customer was, who their target audience was, and really helping bring their message to life through commercials, through advertising, through marketing materials.
Nice.
That experience alone, hands down, taught me exactly how to create and establish a brand that would resonate with so many people. And so you would think that marketing is a diverse field and it's filled with diverse people, but I was often the only one in the room, the only one that looked like me, sounded like me, came from where I came from. And so I was always advocating for other women who could be sitting at the table, other women who could find a voice. I was always the only Black girl. And so I came to this point in my career where I was just not filled, and I was just looking for a space of fulfillment. And I was tired of being the only one and being an imposter, trying to identify with other people who didn't have the same cultural background as me. But now let me tell you, so I told you I studied abroad and I went to Europe on this trip. So it wasn't like I came from a family who wasn't cultured. But I was tired of having to explain my weave, my braids, my everything in between to people who just felt like they didn't have to know, they didn't want to learn, but you have to always explain to them, right? That's how I created Boss. I created Boss because I needed an outlet of women. And so I did Boss for a year and a half before I ever even quit my job. And it was a brunch that I had on, quarterly on Saturday mornings at Neiman Marcus Cafe. And I would invite women who needed a space to connect with other women who were going through the things that they were going through and who wanted and desired more.
I love that. I don't even want to interrupt you. I just want you to keep talking because your story is so good. But I want to say that I really identify with that because my brand that I created is My Life, My Way. And to me, as I listen to you talk, you are creating, or you created your life, your way, on your terms. And so you were able to move from that side business to become a full-time entrepreneur, which is what you do now. What was the final thing that pushed you to go full-time?
Yeah. The final thing that really pushed me to really move forward is in my corporate gig, we had just gotten a new CMO, and you had to learn her new ways and you had to really prove yourself all over again. I was tired of having to just do that constantly in a space where I knew what my worth was, but everyone around me was trying to figure out where, was I in the right position? Was I in the right role? Was I doing the right thing? So I was tired of having to constantly do that and explain who I was and what I was capable of doing. And so from that really kind of opened my lens into thinking bigger, thinking broader, and really thinking about my career over the next 20 years, not just the next 3-4 years, right? And so I had our first annual Boss Woman of the Year event, and it was one of our bigger events at the time. I think I had about 100 women show up to it. And so I was like, yeah, I think it's time for me to really put all of my effort into this. And also at that same time, I was trying to get pregnant. And so I had gotten pregnant, and the week that event happened, I had a miscarriage. So I was like, I think it's time for me to start betting on myself. And so I took really what a lot of people would see as pain, and I turned it into an opportunity to say, God didn't allow me to birth this baby, but let me go birth my boss baby. And from birthing that and really just putting all of my energy, time, and effort into it, it has really taken off. And so just to really answer your question, I had been in a place at my job where, again, I was trying to prove that I was good enough to be there to people who really didn't care if I was there or not. And so from that just by having to be in that space and be in that environment that just was toxic and competitive, I was like, I'm going to quit. And when I went into my boss's office, into my CMO's office, I told her I was quitting. They told me to go home and think about it. They were like, are you sure? And I was like, no, I've been thinking about this. And so the next day I came in and I was like, no, here's my resignation. I'm quitting. And they were like, what are you going to go do? And I was like, I'm going to go live my best life and I will figure it out. And it doesn't matter to you what I'm going to go do. Why are you so concerned with what I'm going to go do? I'm going to go be happy. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to have to be in an environment to prove to you that this Black girl is worth being at the table. And so that's what I did. So on December the 1st, that was my last day. I was scared out of my mind. I didn't know what I was going to do. Luckily, I had a husband who was very supportive of me, taking that leap. But I didn't know what I was going to do. And 2018 taught me so much. But most importantly, it taught me always have a plan. Always have a plan. No matter if you have to pivot from the plan, that's okay. But always have a plan. So that's what I did.
Oh my goodness, I have goosebumps. So I am thinking about women's empowerment right now and feeling so inspired and empowered by your story and your authenticity to be your true self, which is coming out loud and clear in this interview. So thank you for being that way. I want to ask you about risk because you went in there and you said, I'm going to go live my best life. And did you have the plan?
No, I didn't. 2018 taught me the plan. Okay. But, I didn't have a plan, but I did. I knew that I was going to take Boss to the next level. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do that. I didn't know exactly what that looked like. I knew I was going to spend all of my time and my effort into really creating this digital platform space and this really in-person community to give women tools that they needed to exceed in life. I knew that. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it, though.
What made you be appreciative of the risks that's involved and to continue taking action?
I took the risk because I knew betting on myself by me doing it myself was greater than allowing someone else to have access over my life and them basically saying when I wasn't in the room that I couldn't be there anymore. I knew that was more important to me than allowing someone else to have that freedom over me. Mm-hmm. And so I've always been a risk taker. I've never been afraid. I have lived a fearless life ever since I was a little girl. I've always just been that fearless person that just wasn't afraid to jump. Nothing ever really scares me. And I just put myself out there and I just do it. And so by doing what I really felt aligned with my why in life, my purpose and my passion, it didn't feel like I was taking a risk. Mm-hmm. Because you can look at a job anywhere, any day. There's no lack of jobs. And I have skills and I have the education. I have an MBA. I'm not afraid of failing. And if I have to go back and get a job, I will go do that if that's what it comes to. But I have already made up in my mind that I'm not afraid to fail. I share with my community all the time how scared I am about certain things. And I think that just resonates with them a little bit more because they're dealing with the same thing. I don't have all of the answers. Nobody has all of the answers. People need to stop pretending like they do because so many of us don't. So really in that space, I've just always been a risk taker. I moved to Dallas without even seeing the place I was going to live in. And I just moved. So I've always just been one of those people who wasn't afraid to go do what their heart desired, which I know that is a characteristic that little people have. But if you've grown up in a space that has allowed you to take risks, you're less afraid to do so. And I appreciate my parents for allowing me to always be a risk taker. That's just something that's just been instilled inside of me for a very long time.
I'm glad that you just said that because really that's a skill in itself, being able to have an appreciation for failure and being willing to take the risk to fail and move forward despite it. So what would you say is the formula for successfully owning your career?
I would say for successfully owning your career is number one, you need to know why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, I think that Before you even have a plan, you need to know why. Because your why is the thing that's going to wake you up every morning. It's the thing that you're going to be excited about. Because when things don't go exactly the way you want it to go, you always need to go back to why you're even doing it in the first place to make yourself connected to that. And so first, just identifying what your why is. And to me, identifying your why is who are you impacting? What are you doing that inspires others? And what are the non-negotiables in what you are doing? And once you kind of figure that piece out, you'll be able to identify your why. And my why is connecting people, not even just women, connecting people with tools and resources that they need to cultivate the life of their dreams. It used to be the career of their dreams, but now I believe that it's the life of their dreams. And so every day I want to make sure that I'm living in that with the content that I push out, with the people that I'm connecting with what's on my website, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that that's number one. But then number two, you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan and you need to work towards the plan. So for me, I have this vision board of me in action doing the vision that I've set out. So not necessarily I have a vision board that's of pretty pictures and images, but I've told this to my friends a couple of times and some of them don't get it and it's totally cool, but I want to sell out stadium tours. I want to be the Beyonce of stadium tour sellout of connecting women and people together. And so I have it on my vision board of stadiums filled with people and me on the stage of that stadium. And so I visualize that every day. But I know that there's going to be work that I have to put into to make that happen. This isn't going to magically appear. So what am I doing every day? And so weekly, I map out on Sundays, what am I doing to make my goals happen? And then I time block that on my calendar. So to me, it's knowing your why, creating a vision, having a plan, and then working towards it. It's not necessarily something that's I'm a guru and I'm going to tell you this, blah, blah, blah. It's that simple. The hard part is people don't want to work towards it. Mm-hmm. That's the part where people get off track. Mm-hmm. And then they get lost or no's come their way and they get discouraged and they don't pick it back up again.
Well, I would say that it's working because you have a pretty sizable community that's listening to your voice and following you in your community.
I mean, but the crazy part is that this time last year, I probably had about 3,000 people in my community.
Wow.
Now we have 27,000.
Are you primarily Instagram?
Instagram, Facebook, and our email database.
Okay, got you.
And then our podcast. We have a podcast too.
Right.
That's on iTunes. So yeah.
Awesome. Can you think of a moment in your career that you avoided responsibility?
Oh my God, yes. Today. I mean, that's all the time. I was creating my list last night and I was going through it today and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what can I push off? Because I think that just like anybody else, I get overwhelmed, I have a lot going on. I have a lot on my plate. And so the thing that helps me tick and really work at full capacity is just putting my head down and getting it done and not making excuses for why I don't. Because when I push myself in a land of excuses, then I can keep going on and making it more and more and more. So I just have to put my head down and get it done. And I think with owning responsibility or pushing it off on others, one thing that I've really learned in 2018 is that I'm not good at everything. So instead of me spending hours working on something that are not my strengths, that I'm not necessarily good at, find other people to do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not spinning my wheels, my energy, my time on stuff that I don't even know how to do. And so I don't want to say you pawn that off and that's a responsibility, but it is in trusting that someone else will get it done, But I have learned that about myself in 2018 of just allowing someone who's an expert at doing something do it and me not trying to figure it out.
I think you're so right because for the longest time I was trying to figure out how to use QuickBooks Online. I'm big on energy and was an energy drain for me trying to reconcile the books And so exactly to your point, I finally hired a bookkeeper to get it sorted, get it reconciled so I could pull the right business documents. And it's so hard to, not feel like you're avoiding responsibility. But to your point, it's absolutely about knowing what your strength is and having the right people that are going to follow through and help you to execute on your vision. So yeah. Absolutely. Well, what advice would you give to someone wanting to successfully own their career?
The advice that I would give to anyone who just really wants to own their career is to just not be afraid to move forward. Taking small bite-sized steps every single day. I think that sometimes we think that we have to have this massive plan to just start off, but we don't necessarily just take little steps every day. Like I said, I started the community because I had a void in my own personal life. It wasn't a massive community. It was a small community of 25 women who met at Neiman Marcus Cafe. But I just took a little piece of what would fulfill me back in, and I made action towards creating a space where I knew other women were going through the same things. And that's the advice I would give. Just don't be afraid to start. I think that sometimes we're afraid to start because we're afraid of what other people think, what other people are going to say. And if we're truly doing it because it aligns with our why, then who cares? Because that's the thing that God created you for. It's the thing that you're ticking with inside of you. It's the part that makes you feel alive. And so I couldn't give any other advice than just start, even if it's the smallest step that you can take. Just make some sort of movement forward. And by you making move, there is power in inertia. So by you moving forward, something will happen.
What about continuing? You said, just start. So what's the advice for continuing?
I think with continuing, you have to be comfortable pivoting. So if you're doing something and you're not getting the results that you want, be okay with making a pivot also. Because everything isn't going to be great off the bat. And so you're going to have to go back, find out why it's not working. I go back to my corporate life of using data for everything that I do. If the numbers don't add up, if the numbers don't say that this is an added benefit, then you need to look at that to make the pivots. Doesn't mean that you are not aligning yourself with your why. It just means that you need to make some changes and adjust, and do not be afraid to adjust in making the pivots that are necessary. And what does your sounding board look like? What are the people around you saying? Listen to the people that are around you. Lean into them as a source, as a focus group, as information gatherers on what you're doing.
Awesome. How have you celebrated your successes?
Oh, let me tell you, I am the worst at that. I was just saying this to someone else the other day. I don't feel like I'm successful by any means yet. I feel like we're making strides towards where I want to be, but I don't feel like I'm in an area where I can say I've been successful in what I'm doing. And so that's something I'm personally working on. I'm trying to figure out what self-care looks like for myself, along with celebration. And I don't know if other people experience this, but I'll never be the person who would be braggy or on Instagram saying, oh my God, we did this, we did that, in such a way that feels cocky. I just feel like it's not for me to celebrate that. I think that it's for our community to celebrate what's happening and what we're able to give them. And to me, celebrating is when I don't have to introduce myself to people. To me, that's what success looks like. And when I feel like I can celebrate what I'm doing.
Very cool. So, all right, well, tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, totally. So we're on Instagram. Our Instagram is Boss Women Media. We also have a private Facebook group called Boss Women Media, and our website is bosswomen.org, where you can be connected to our weekly blog, our daily affirmational text messages, and upcoming events that may be happening in your city.
Awesome. Well, Marty, this is amazing. I feel like I could talk to you the whole day.
I know. Thank you so much. Then sometimes I go on and on and I'm like,
it was really, really good. It was like a juicy novel. I wanted to hear more. It was very inspiring as well. So really, thank you so much for your availability, your authenticity, and just your wisdom.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you.
I sincerely hope that you enjoyed this week's empowering career story on the podcast. If you did, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. Wherever you listen to the podcast, be sure that you are subscribing and that you rate and review the podcast. It's so important as we continue to spread the word of career empowerment. In addition, you can head over to the LinkedIn platform and join the Power of Owning Your Career discussion group. There you can have access to the guests who have been on the podcast, as well as others listening to the podcast, as well as myself, where we can continue the conversation. I hope to see you on that platform. You can also email me at pooyc@simonemorris.com if you have a suggestion for guest or a message that you want me to hear personally. Thanks so much, and make it an inspiring, empowering week in your career.